Okay, so there's a brand new Hellraiser movie coming out. So I figured it would be a good time to talk about Clive Barker's original movie. I watch it pretty much every year. It's a great movie. Everybody knows it. It's one of those movies I saw in the local video store as a kid. And just the cover was enough to freak me out a bit. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way. It's one of the most, imaginative movies I've ever seen. And I think even after you watch it, whether you like it or not, you're still going to say, that's something I've never seen before. Like, it's really unique. And that's what Clive Barker does. He writes incredibly unique stories. And of course, Andrew Robinson is in it. And I got to mention him because he's also Garak on Deep Space Nine. Easily my favorite character on that show. And I mention it because, well, I'm just incapable of ignoring Star Trek references. But anyway, let's just get into it. And if for some reason you're watching this video and you've never seen Hellraiser, you should go watch it. Not only because there's going to be spoilers in this video, but because I don't know if I'm going to be able to fully articulate the insanity that occurs in this movie. So it will help if you at least have an idea of what I'm attempting to talk about. And there's obviously going to be some gory images in this video. Just be warned, I guess. It's Hellraiser, so I don't know what else you would expect. Anyway, here we go. Hellraiser from 1987, directed by Clive Barker, starring Andrew Robinson, Ashley Lawrence, Claire Higgins, and Doug Bradley. The movie opens up on a mysterious cube-shaped item. It's the lament configuration, of course, although I don't think it's ever referred to as that, at least not in this movie. They just call it the box, which is strange because it's clearly more of a cube. It's basically a demented Rubik's Cube. And a mysterious merchant says, "What's your pleasure, sir?" And he's speaking to a man named Frank Cotton. And Frank is interested in purchasing the box, and he's willing to pay top dollar. And he has the filthiest goddamn fingernails I've ever seen. I mean, what the fuck has he been doing? I mean, it looks like he's been tickling a pig's ball bag. And if all those bills are Benjamins, it looks like he's spending a few $1,000 on this fucking thing. So I hope it's worth it. Back at his house, in a completely empty room on the top floor, Frank starts fucking around with the box. It looks like he cleaned his fingernails up a bit, though, so that's nice. And he starts rearranging the box, and it takes a new shape, and bad things start to happen for Frank. Some hooks shoot out of the walls and fuck him up real good. And in the aftermath, it looks as though he's been ripped to shreds. And then the Cenobites show up for the first time, led by Pinhead, who is just from a visual standpoint, has to be one of the best character designs in all of fiction. It's so fucking nuts. And for some reason, Pinhead arranges Frank's fucked up face like he's putting together a puzzle. It's really fucking weird. And he collects the lament configuration, he puts it in its default position, and they all disappear. The Cenobites are gone, Frank's remains are gone, everything. It's like they were never there. In mere moments after this, Larry Cotton and his wife Julia walk into the house. And Larry is Frank's brother. And he and Julia are going to be moving in. It was apparently Frank and Larry's childhood home. And for whatever reason, Larry has chosen to settle down here, which is a horrendous mistake, as we'll see. And I'm not sure where this house is. The movie is filmed in England, and it was originally supposed to take place there, but I guess the studio wanted some more American shit. Larry has an American accent, but his wife Julia is clearly from England. And Larry says she's back on her home turf or something to that effect. So I have no idea. All I know is that Julia is uncomfortable about living here. And she says at least it's better than Brooklyn. So all we know for certain is that it's not Brooklyn. And also, fuck you, Julia. What's wrong with Brooklyn? Better than Brooklyn. Fuck off. And she gets even more uncomfortable when she discovers Frank's living space. Neither of them had any idea that he was here. And it looks like he sleeps on the floor with a bunch of porn and gross shit all around him, Frank's a bit of a scumbag, in case you can't tell. But Julia is into that shit. Later on, we see a flashback that shows Julia had an affair with Frank while she was engaged to Larry. So Julia likes scumbags, at least on the side. And Frank likes to kiss people on the chin. I mean, what the fuck is going on here? He's sucking on her chin. I gotta be honest, I never thought of doing that. That's a new one. It's working, too. She's getting all gooed up. She even likes it when Frank takes out a switchblade and rubs it on her clavicle and cuts off her fucking negligee. I don't want to kink shame, but I think it's fair to say that cunnilingus of the chin, chinalingus, and switchblades, that's not typical behavior. And Larry's daughter Kirsty shows up, and I guess she's in town visiting, wherever town is. And apparently her mother died a while back, which means that Julia is her stepmother. And she's never been very fond of Julia, and I think the feeling is probably mutual. I guess Kirsty is there to help them settle in. She seems to be helping out around the house. But Julia is not helping. She's upstairs, in the upstairs room, fantasizing about being penetrated by Frank. And Larry is downstairs, getting his hand penetrated by a loose nail sticking out of a wall while he's carrying a mattress. Eh? You see the parallels? And Larry goes to Julia. He can't seem to stand the sight of blood. I mean, you're in the wrong fucking movie, Larry. I don't know what to tell you. And some of his blood drips on the floor of the upstairs room. And while Julia and Kirsty take Larry to the hospital to get stitched up, Frank starts to emerge from the floor. He's basically returning to life. Kind of the same way that Dr. Manhattan does in Watchmen. He's just kind of gradual. Except in Frank's case, he needs more blood to complete the process. Right now, he's just a gooey skeleton. And when Julia discovers him in this grotesque state, she's shocked at first, but eventually agrees to help him by luring men back to the house while Larry isn't home, so she can murder them with a claw hammer, and Frank can feed off their bodies like some fucked up vampire. And she does this with zero explanation from Frank. She has no idea what's happened to him or what the hell's going on. I mean, how much does Julia need this dick? How good a lay is this guy? It seems like Frank's only redeeming quality in life is that he bangs Julia well. He's not even remotely nice to her. And he's a disgusting animal. And even when he doesn't look like a feral ghoul from Fallout, he's a piece of shit. And yet, Julia is willing to murder these unsuspecting dudes just so she can have maybe another chance to have sex with Frank. And she even seems to attracted to him in his current state. She's like licking his fucking skinless fingers and shit. What a fucking psychopath. And as she's hiding the remains of the poor, emaciated victim that she just killed, Larry comes home. And she pretends to be sick in the bathroom. Or maybe she's actually sick. I don't know. I certainly would be. And Larry says this.
Are you in there? You want a cookie, little girl?
No, I don't. What the fuck was that? In any other movie, that would be the fucking weirdest thing in it. But not this movie. That's a normal thing to say in this movie. And somehow Larry is completely oblivious to what's going on, never finds a dead body or Frank. He doesn't smell the stench of dead flesh, nothing. And elsewhere, in this strange, unknown city, Kirsty is working in a pet shop. And some kind of Karen demands to speak to the manager because her fucking canary has dysentery or something. I don't know. It looks like the beginnings of a Monty Python sketch. And while Kirsty is dealing with this crotchety old bag and her pheasant, a homeless man walks into the pet store and he starts eating a handful of crickets. And Kirsty kicks him out. Okay, I know that's pretty gnarly, but it might be kind of mean to just kick him out. I mean, this poor prick is so hungry, he's eating crickets right out of the mouth of a reptile. I'd kick him out too, but I might give him $20 and say, go get some real food, will you please? Now that's $20 out of the cash register, by the way, not my $20. I'm a nice guy, but I'm not altruistic. Let's not get nuts. And finally, Frank explains some of what's going on. He also somehow has the lament configuration in his possession. I don't know how the fuck that happened, but he has it. And he basically tells Julia that he fucked around with it because he wanted to experience the limits of both pain and pleasure. He's an extreme masochist, essentially. And he's a sadist. He's both. And it looks like he got exactly what he wanted. The Cenobites showed up. They threw some horrific hooks into his love handles and tits and spun him around for a bit while he jerked himself into oblivion. And then they ripped him to shreds and sent him to hell. Which, in this case, is just an extreme version of horny jail. And somehow Frank found his way out of horny jail. Minus his skin and a few major organs. Bloodshed in the place where he died seems to have been the catalyst for his return. And that's where we are now. I mean, it's fucking madness. And of course, until Julia can lure another victim back to this room, Frank is stuck twiddling his bony thumbs and torturing rats. Yeah, he's apparently been nailing rats to the fucking walls out of sheer psychopathic boredom. I mean, Jesus Christ, get this guy a crossword puzzle or something. And when Larry hears a noise in that room, he goes to investigate. And Julia is desperate to stop him from discovering Frank. Frank would have no problem killing his own brother. But I guess Julia doesn't want that to happen. She apparently still has some level of human feeling for her husband. So she distracts him from the noise by initiating sex. And Frank sneaks into the bedroom and starts slicing up a rat. Which is maybe the most horrendous, jealous behavior I can think of. Guy's got no fucking skin and he's whittling rats. And Julia can see Frank and she becomes very uncomfortable and she tells Larry to stop. And he walks out of the room frustrated. And he never catches a glimpse of his creepy skinless brother slicing up rats in the corner. He's just oblivious. And later, Frank talks to Julia, and he asks her if she loves Larry. She says no, but she insists that Frank leave him alone. Frank is looking for one more victim, and his own brother is number one on his list, I guess. But for some reason, Julia is protecting Larry, despite not loving him. So she goes and lures another random dude to the house, except this time, Kirsty sees her bring the dude inside the house, probably assuming that Julia is merely cheating on Larry. If only, Kirsty, if only that was the biggest problem here. And once again, in the upstairs room, Frank sucks the life out of this poor son of a bitch and still doesn't get his skin back, though. I mean, he still looks exactly the same as he did before. I guess maybe that didn't work. Maybe that dude had the wrong blood type or something. I don't know. And Kirsty walks in. She walks in on this whole nightmare scenario. And Frank says, "It's me, Uncle Frank." "Oh, yeah, you're my uncle that has no skin and likes to suck the plasma out of people like they're a 7-Eleven Slurpee. Now I remember." And despite promising himself to Julia, Frank is rather horned up for his own niece. And he creepily says, "Come to daddy." I mean, just what a subhuman animal this guy is. He might be the worst human being in any movie. He's so fucking terrible. And Kirsty is attacked by him. She fights him off pretty easily. She kicks him in the nuts. So I guess he has nuts, but no skin. So I guess his balls are just hanging there like two ball bearings from a Newton's cradle or some shit. And she picks up the lament configuration and she escapes with it, leaving Frank alone in this room because he's too much of a pussy to leave it without his skin. And Kirsty is on the run. It's fair to say she's had a bit of a rough day so far, and it's only going to get worse. She ends up passing out on the street, and a guy in a Yankees hat comes over to her to help her. So maybe this is actually supposed to be New York? Did we just confirm it? Well, no, because there's Yankee fans everywhere you go. They're just a bunch of front-running bastards. I don't know. It's either New York or Old York. Maybe it's both. I don't know. Anyway, Kirsty ends up in the hospital, and it looks like a hospital from the early 1920s. I mean, look at this room. What the hell? Where the hell are we? It looks like a fucking haunted asylum. And the box is still in her possession, and she, of course, starts messing around with it. And a doorway to heck opens up right there in the hospital room, and Kirsty, being a bit of a weirdo, walks through it. She finds herself in a very narrow hallway, and at the end of it, she discovers this monstrosity. It looks like a giant shrimp with a monstrous face on it. And it chases her back to the hospital room. And when she makes it, the passageway is gone, and so is the shrimp monster. But the Cenobites show up, and they explain that the box is a way to summon them, and that they take whoever uses it to hell. Pinhead says they are demons to some and angels to others, which I think is the most interesting idea surrounding the Cenobites, and it's never explored, ever. And Kirsty asks if a man called Frank Cotton was taken to hell by them. And one of them immediately answers yes. Oh, yes, is the exact quote. I guess he was the only Frank Cotton in hell, because they were like, oh yeah, we know that fucking guy. He's a douchebag. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And they don't like hearing that Frank escaped. So Kirsty tries to bargain with them. She offers to give them Frank in exchange for her own life. And they kind of agree, but not really.
I can lead you to hell, and you can take him back instead of me.
Perhaps we prefer you.
I want to hear him confess himself. Then, maybe...
But if you cheat us,
we'll tear your soul apart.
Oof. Fucking yikes. So basically Pinhead is saying, we'll think about it. Give us Frank Cotton, and we'll think about it. I used to think that at the end of the movie, the Cenobites kind of reneged on the deal. But they never actually agreed to it in the first place. It's kind of funny. And it's at this point, Frank and Julia are getting kind of desperate. Now that Kirsty has found him, they don't have a lot of time. So they decide to finally kill poor Larry. He comes home and is killed by Frank and Julia and absorbed off screen, which I think is a mistake. It would have been cool to see the two brothers confront each other. They never actually have a scene together in the movie. And instead, it just cuts to Frank coming down the stairs while wearing Larry's skin. So Frank looks like Larry now. And Julia seems pretty happy about it, which is fucked up beyond all recognition. I mean, she wanted Frank, right? She wanted what Frank looks like. And now he's what Larry looks like, the man she doesn't love. Shouldn't that be a constant reminder of the heinous acts she committed? But she's not bothered, couldn't care less, and she fucks Frank while he cosplays as Larry. Fucking yikes. And sometime later, Kirsty comes home with the box. She talks to Julia and demands to see her father. And when she sees Frank, she thinks it's her dad, despite the fact that his face seems to have been pasted on with some curdled milk and strawberry Smuckers. I like Kirsty. I think she's a very intelligent horror movie protagonist. But she never once asks what the fuck is on your forehead, Dad. I mean, and Frank, as Larry, tells Kirsty that he had to kill Frank. So Kirsty thinks that the emaciated corpse in the top room is Frank and not her dad, which it actually is. It's all a big Three's Company style mix-up. But Frank finally gives it away when he says, "Come to Daddy," the same creepy way he said it before. And Kirsty is in the fight of her life. She manages to get away from Frank and Julia, and Frank accidentally stabs Julia. And he feels no remorse in doing this. He takes the opportunity to absorb her juices. You see what happens, Julia? Do you see what happens when you shack up with a skinless psychopath? And once Julia is mesomorphed, Frank goes after Kirsty, and after a Jesus Christ jump scare, yeah, they actually used Jesus for a jump scare in this movie. And after that, she leads Frank. I'm almost forgetting his name because he looks like Larry, but it's Frank. She leads Frank to the upstairs room. And the Cenobites show up to claim him, which they do. And it's fucking horrendous. He gets the hook treatment again. And, I mean, look at him. Look at this sorry state he's in. Holy shit. What a mess. And this is his final line.
Jesus wept.
Yikes. I feel like I've said yikes a lot, but that's the only word I can use to describe this shit. It's fucking nuts. I mean, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, but that was fucking brutal. And then the Cenobites try to take Kirsty to hell too. Seems like they're backing out of their deal, but like I said, they never actually agreed to it in the first place.
We have such sights to show you.
And of course, Kirsty manages to use the box to send them all back to hell one by one, which is a little anticlimactic because Pinhead is the first one to go. I mean, he should be the last one to go. Just so he can have some creepy lines like the one I just showed you. And there's some really wonky special effects. I think they were running out of money at this point or something. Doesn't look great. But she makes it. And I should probably mention that Kirsty has kind of a boyfriend in this movie. I didn't because he's so inconsequential to anything going on. He has no clue what's going on. He only shows up at the end to try to help Kirsty. But she ends up saving him at one point. He's just pretty fucking useless. But they both survive. The Cenobites are gone, and so is the house they were just in. Seems like it burnt down, even though they never show it burning. Again, it's probably a budget issue. I wonder if they called the fire department or the fire brigade. That might tell us where the fuck we are. But we'll never know. Anyway, Kirsty drops the lament configuration into the fire, and the cricket-eating homeless guy shows up and retrieves it from the fire. And then he turns into the skeleton of a fucking gargoyle and flies away. See, now I'm glad she didn't give him that $20. Who knows what he would have done with it. And basically, that's the end of the movie. And there's no coming back from this, if you're Kirsty. There's no amount of therapy that's going to fix what just happened. I mean, her uncle was creeping on her and tried to kill her while wearing her murdered father's skin. And some S&M demons tried to take her to hell. There's no coming back from that, Kirsty. I'm sorry. You're never going to be normal. That's it. And the movie closes where it started, with the mysterious merchant once again selling the lament configuration to some fuckhead who has no idea what he's getting into. The end. Great horror movie. It's iconic, obviously. I love it. Although I gotta be honest, if you put me in the insane world of this movie, I don't think I'd have any problem. I'd make it out just fine. Because I wouldn't be fucking around with any lament configurations. And if I discovered a gooey skeleton man in my attic, I'd be dancing on his fucking forehead before he could even ask for help getting his skin back. I'd be stomping on this fucking thing like he was Billy Bats from Goodfellas. Frank would be back in hell before he knows it, and I'd be scraping his innards off the bottom of my fucking Nikes. Because he's basically a Draugr from Skyrim, and you can't take chances with those motherfuckers. Otherwise, they'll sneak up on you. And I've said this movie is great about 12 times already, and it is, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the box summons the Cenobites, and it can send them away, but they also show up unprompted at one point. So, I don't really understand that. I don't get how that happens. And they actually talk to Kirsty and negotiate with her, even though she solved the puzzle the same way Frank did. They never give her the hook shit, even when they're trying to take her to hell at the end of the movie. Doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't bother me because, you know, just the look, the feel, the atmosphere, the practical effects, the concept, all of that makes up for any plot holes or inconsistencies, in my opinion. I mean, I love the idea that hell is not really a religious version of hell. It's kind of just another dimension. And you get to see a lot more of it in the sequel, which is awesome. And the sequel is pretty much just as good as the first one, in my opinion. But after that, it got pretty sad. The third one is okay, I guess. But Pinhead is just a generic horror bad guy in that movie. And the Cenobites are just a joke. I mean, you got a guy with CDs jammed in his fucking head. I mean, and he throws CDs at people like they're shurikens. It's just, it's not scary or creepy. It's just, it looks like just some pervert drove his bicycle through the window of a Sam Goody, and now he's got, you know, Better Than Ezra and Weezer CDs sticking out of his fucking face. It's just a mess. And after that, they went to space. They went to space in the fourth movie. It took Jason 9 movies before he went to space. But Hellraiser did it in the fourth movie. And it's also a prequel and a sequel. If you've seen Hellraiser 4, and you know what the fuck is happening in that one, good for you, because I gave up trying to figure that one out a long time ago. And it only got worse from there. A lot of direct-to-video releases that basically have nothing to do with Hellraiser at all. It's Hellraiser in name only. And it's easily the worst of the major horror franchises in terms of sequels. You know, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Child's Play. Hellraiser has just as many sequels as those movies, but they're not nearly as good. Once you get past the second one, it's a fucking mess. So here's hoping that the new one is going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. The trailer looks creepy. So maybe there's finally some hope for Hellraiser. But anyway, let's wrap this up. I'm going to try to release a spooky-themed video once a week in October. We'll see how that goes. I can't promise anything, obviously, but I've got some ideas. But that's all I got for now. Until next time, take it easy.